she needs no introduction. She is the personification. She is the one who is looking after women's safety, and she also heads the Cyber Security Bureau, which is very important these days. And in addition to that, she also heads the CID,
which is actually my main charge.
Which is actually your main charge. So I leave the floor open. It's an informal interaction. So whatever questions they have, we can. It's like a.
Good afternoon, ma'am. So you head two of the most important wings, like Sir said, Cybercrime and Women's Safety Wing. So I'll start off with Women's Safety Wing. And we know there are a lot of initiatives like She Teams and Bharosa Centers, T-Safe, all of it. So one thing that we're increasingly seeing these days is rape cases and sexual assault cases, especially when women are traveling in the night, in buses, in private buses, autos, etc. So I do know that T-Safe works for that very purpose. But so how private buses when so many other people are there, it's very concerning. So what are the initiatives being taken by the Women's Safety Wing? Is it can you talk about that?
So, good afternoon. First, I'll start with saying that luckily, Telangana isn't seeing any kind of cases which you're talking about, meaning there are very rare incidents where there have been, rapes or assaults in public places. That's although the statistics would show an increase in the rate of crime, which is normal across the world, including crime against women. But those crimes which you are talking about, where it is happening forcefully in a public place, thankfully that is not something which is happening. There'll be very rare incident. In fact, recently when we did analysis of the cases of rape and all which were reported, we found that more than 90% of them are actually ones in which there is that the offender, and most of them were happening in private places, within four walls of ABCD whatever places, rather than happening in public places. All said and done, even a single case is really terrifying and needs attention from all of us. And therefore, so all the initiatives which the Telangana police has taken is in the direction of making spaces safe for women. So when you are talking about the public places, so that there is the street harassment is the one where we started the She Teams. So make the public spaces free, safe. Then if it comes to workplace, we started the Sahas initiative last year. Now when it is coming to the travel part which you was talking, we started with the T-Safe initiative, which is not just any kind of an app or something. It's not. It's basically a ride monitoring service which no other police offers anywhere. So, and it takes away the digital divide. So you don't have to have a smartphone or an internet connection to avail the service. If you have, even better, but not. So that is what we are doing. We are also looking, going forward, besides all the awareness and all that we do, we are also thinking of, which is now the plan, and we're trying to work out how to go about this, is thinking about how to bring about change, especially in the mindset of the youngster itself. It's like something you call for sports or something, catch them young. Can we do something wherein, the youngsters, especially children in their teenage and all, can we talk to them and have some kind of a small course or curriculum designed for them, which can be imparted in schools, which actually teaches you how you should behave, and both genders. It teaches boys how to behave with girls, what to do, what not to do, and and it also teaches girls how they should be, when they are interacting with the other gender. So we're trying to build on that kind of a thing, and that is probably the next thing, if we try to, so that these things need to be ingrained in you since you are young. Earlier we had those joint family systems or everything, so you had somebody who would be talking, and you can. Now, when we have this nuclear family, the teenagers, and it happens with all of us, I'm sure it happened with me, I'm sure it's happened with you, I'm seeing it with my daughter, that in that age group, what parents say is really irrelevant. I mean, you don't believe anything what your parents say. You think that they're only just bossing around or they're only telling you things. But in previously, when you had a big family system, somebody or other would be close to you. You had people of all generations and ages living together. So the child could imbibe. Right now, you need somebody else to actually tell that, okay, these are the don'ts and do's and this is how you should be behaving. So I think that kind of an intervention is something which I am looking forward to. I hope we are able to do it soon.
So you were talking about teenage girls and boys. So another thing that has come up recently is YouTube videos where people are flagging, abusive material, child sexual abusive material that's being put out. So I do know in our previous interaction you did say something that the Telangana police is, surfing through web and also having plans regarding NGOs collaboration for CSAM especially. If you could talk about that.
Something which is already started, and I wouldn't like to preempt in saying, but yes, we've already tied up and with an NGO, and now in the Cyber Security Bureau, we are in the process of having a fully functional child protection unit, which will look at all that, but in some time, it's already happening. Yeah.
Ma'am, I want to ask you, because you spoke about integrating something like that, in curriculum as well. Now, if we look in the last 6 months, the cybercrime cases here, I think you've arrested about 165 people. I think in 695 cases across the state, 3,000 in the country. Cybercrime cases are still, rising. So, would you say it's important to integrate that sort of teaching for children in schools? And also, if I may ask, how are you, tackling, keeping elderly people safe from cybercrime?
See, cybercrime is again something which globally everybody is struggling with, the rising cybercrime. It's one of the most organized crime which is happening, and therefore it becomes very difficult to break those networks and everything. As far as awareness is concerned, awareness can never be enough. It's like, and I personally believe that cybercrime is one of the most preventable crimes. Because this is the crime in which you are actually sharing everything. So if you are aware that and you don't share, it doesn't happen. It's not that somebody is going to come and breaking into your home or assault. So nothing like that. We ourselves are sharing and transferring money or whatever, for whether it is for fear, whether it is for some quick gains, whatever, the way they manipulate people. So it is one of the most preventables, and there can't be enough of awareness. We on our part are doing. In certain classes already, certain do's and don'ts which were relating to good touch, bad touch, certain digital literacy is already a part of how to keep yourself safe online, is already part of curriculum in schools. Going further, I think a good idea if this could also become a part, but then it is basically about cyber hygiene. The modus operandi of the accused will keep changing. I remember we started with the loan apps, and then we went into online gaming, and we had investment frauds, and now we are having digital arrest. But the basic remains the same. The basic being that yes, don't share your details, don't click on a link, don't transfer money to anybody. That remains the basic whatever he does. So if we practice basic cyber hygiene, I guess should be enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Telangana has one of the best cyber security architecture.
The bureau or the architecture?
The infrastructure.
Yeah.
Telangana police definitely has a very good infrastructure.
Yeah.
We would like to know, it's interesting actually, what goes on inside, the cyber security bureau. Suppose a serious complaint comes. What is the toughest case that you cracked? And what does it take to crack a case like that? Now it is spanning over countries. Suppose we take loan apps. They are running somewhere from China, or somewhere from Cambodia, or some other countries. It is cutting across different countries. So how do you, they operate through VPNs or different, this thing. So how do you trace them? What goes into it? And what kind of personnel do you have? What kind of training? What kind of personnel? Or do you use somebody, if the sharp guy from say IIT Hyderabad or some hackers? How does it go on? Because police personnel, I don't think many may not have this kind of technical know-how.
So first of all, can't share my trade secrets. That's, for us can't tell how we actually do it in the police, because there'll be, with your publicity, people will know, so we'll lose our edge.
It's a broad idea.
See, as far as the bureau is concerned, one, we have a lot of technology or the tools which we are using. One, whether it is establishing links, analyzing, all that. So that's one part of the story which goes on. Second part of the story, you talked about experts. Actually, we are in the process of hiring certain experts from, as you said, the police role. I mean, the capability in the police force to have that kind of expertise, and something which keeps evolving it keeps evolving. It's something which, like technology changes every few months now, similar is this thing also changes. So to keep abreast with this is difficult unless you have domain experts. So we are in the process of now hiring domain experts, which includes the various categories you mentioned and even some more than that. So that we are in the process, because the bureau is just about a year plus old. So these processes are in place, and very soon we will have that. It's already out. We are in the process. The challenge, yes, the one biggest challenge is when these operations are happening from across the borders. One is spread across in this country itself, and then the next part is then when it is across the border. So that is definitely a challenge, because right now those mechanisms are not existing where we can go somewhere and get the people. That kind of mechanism is not there. The I4C is working on that. But yes, that is a challenge, that if you can't get, for example, when we did the loan app in the Hyderabad city, at that time we arrested a couple of Chinese people who were, because they were actually here in India at that point of time. So if they leave the borders, then getting back or getting them is tough. So it's a very challenging, and that is maybe because it's very exciting. That is why, because very challenging, because at first it gives anonymity to the accused, to the person. You can be sitting anywhere across the globe, and now we know that this golden triangle which has come up in Cambodia, where you have industry style hubs from which cybercrime is being operated. So in that kind of a situation, you can be sitting anywhere across the globe, and with a click of button you can be scamming multiple people at the same time across different cities and states. And when you look at a single person also, for example, if I am the victim and if I suppose I transfer about 10 lakh rupees, it goes to tens and 20 accounts. It's not something it goes into one account which you can track and get back to. It goes to various accounts, and then ultimately, part of the money will get withdrawn in Kerala, another part gets withdrawn in Gorakhpur or UP somewhere, a third somewhere in Mewat, a fourth somewhere in Bharatpur, somewhere in Calcutta, whatever. It could be anywhere, or it could be in Telangana also, for all you know. Usually they are very smart enough that you will not find much of it happening in the state where it is happening. So that's a very organized network. And then getting to the really top is a challenge, which we are all struggling, because then when also a lot of the money which gets withdrawn gets converted into the crypto or the bitcoins and then moves. Now that is another area where the tracking or tracing of that money, the protocols still are not very strong enough to assist the law enforcement agencies to actually track that thing. So all that is very challenging. So it's work in progress, I would say.
So this is more of an organized crime.
It is. It's an organized crime. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
So we have the Chinese on one side, we have the
We could be anybody. I mean, we could have multiple, not only one country. It could be anyone. Yeah.
So we have, what I want to understand is that this is not done by some random guy sitting at home.
Usually not, except that there would be certain instances where you talking about normal hackings and all, where there it could be random guys sitting at home also doing that. But the ones which are these, the major financial fraud ones which we are talking about, the digital arrest or the OTP ones or the stock investment, these are not random person sitting at home. It is usually it will be somebody else, because the money is not one to one and one beneficiary and one victim is not there. No, it's a huge kind of a thing.
From your experience, do you think we need a separate law to deal with it? For instance, for organized crime in Maharashtra, they have this MOPA, organized crime. That kind of crime is different, I understand. But do you think we need a separate law to deal with this kind of things, or the existing cyber law?
See, already we have an IT Act which is there. Secondly, we're already now cybercrime is included in organized crime, which has come into the new BNS. So there is a provision now of organized crime section, which wasn't earlier existing in the law, is now included in the new laws, and cybercrime is one of included in that. So personally, I feel it's not much about. It's more about how we implement those laws, and it's also about how quickly disposal happens, rather than having more and more laws. I mean, if we can streamline and have these functioning quickly and ensuring that everything happens, probably maybe there would be at stage where if it's a very huge something network we might need, but then right now I think the existing laws, if they can be implemented properly and have a quick final disposal, probably that deterrent would be good enough rather than very draconian kind of a law.
I'm speaking about, across the borders. You have helped tackle terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, and you've helped also contain Maoism in erstwhile Andhra Pradesh. Could you please tell us, what kind of strategies, what kind of mindset, what kind of strategies did you use, in these two situations?
So basically, it is not one as an individual doing it. So it was an entire government policy and entire everything which is doing. So you are just part of it, which goes around and works in that setup and sees that whatever is there is followed, and you give your little bit to that. So whether working in J&K or whether working in erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, so these were very very well defined strategies, I would say, rather than I would say policies. They were very well defined strategies and tactics which were followed, which most of us were following, and depending where you were posted. For example, when I was posting in Medak, the major issue for us was the militants, because they were the ones who would provide shelter or support and all. We didn't have, so we decided how to isolate them from the general public. So there, what we had is a very massive kind of a community outreach program, so that when the public feels that there is the normal governance system coming close to them, then there is a chance of them slightly getting away from these people. So we had a very massive kind of community outreach system. We also had a very successful part where we through the families and all, we motivated them and got people to surrender and come out of that thing. That was also very successful because of this community outreach, and especially by talking to the families and including them into the general thing. So I think it's part of the larger thing, which you are a part of the larger ecosystem. And yes, you do your little bit to see that things work.
Ma'am, maintaining physical and mental health in such a high stress field is very important. So, what do you do to maintain focused and to stay fit? Is there any regime that you follow? What do you do?
I'm a very lazy person to actually follow those strict regimes or something. I think I'm very lazy as far as that go. But personally, I feel that you should have something which helps you de-stress. You know, everybody can have it. For example, these days I am completely hooked on to the OTT. So I'm binge watching kind of a thing. So, at night I will do a little of that so that you forget about whatever has happened in the day. Or could be anything, whether it's sometimes just interacting with your children or just, all those things can give you. So I guess each to yourself, yes, but definitely have something which, gives you that, nothing said, but it's like something, just one hug to my child is actually sometimes enough to de-stress you, kind of thing. So something little like that, nothing a very strict regime do I follow.
Since you've mentioned OTT and you binge watch a lot, what's the last favorite series of movie that you've binge watched?
The last one which I just finished was Diplomat. So yeah, so I usually watch the ones. I usually watch the foreign ones, and I usually watch something which is like that's political drama or crime or legal and all. But yes, I stick to the foreign ones because if I see the ones which are very good, but which are of local or the Indian, but they are very good, but I don't watch them much because then it feels that you're still continuing with your office and you're still in the same ecosystem. So that is why I rush. But yeah, those are the ones that.
But ma'am, interestingly shows like the Diplomat and stuff, they show a high degree of protocol, and every scene is so well cut out with so much security all the time. And I believe you have some experience in VIP policing as well with the president and prime minister and also former US President Bill Clinton. So how would that actually work? What are the facets of VIP policing?
So first of all, Diplomat, one important is because it's a woman protagonist. So I guess that's also a very important part of it. See, as far as VIP security works, there's the blue book, there's defined protocols and what you need to follow in VIP security. But for me personally, I feel that not only VIP security or anything, I think policing is all but common sense. So if you have enough of it and you are intelligent to use it at the right time, I think whatever it might be, whether it is VIP security, whether it's investigation, whether it's handling crowds, anything, that thing plus an ability to take quick decisions, an ability to understand the situation and react immediately is something which is required in such situations, whether you're doing a VIP security or a bandobast or a crowd management or managing a protest, what we strictly call a law and order and VIP security. Those are the things which are very essential. Otherwise, protocols are anyway, they're well laid out.
Right, ma'am. Policing, as you mentioned, we have known it to be, a sort of male-dominated area. So, how do you think that over the years you have, battled those preconceptions that you have? Do you, if you can share anything?
Yeah, sure. I think it's not only that it was. I think all uniform service, even today, are still very male-dominated, predominantly because numbers. It's a number game. So the number of women definitely is now increasing, and I'm sure when they reach to a critical level, which I personally feel that any office condition which has, I would say we don't even need to be 33%. If we are about 20-25%, I think the entire workplace changes into a women kind of. So personally, I believe like that. So yes, it is there. And you see it in different forms. One is definitely when your numbers are less, you constantly are under a lens. So even today, after 30 years in service, I still feel that yes, everything I do I'll be under a lens because the number is less. It's not that somebody is, it is. So whatever you do and how you do, everybody will keep watching that yes, how is you doing or not. So that comes, so that's one part of it. Second is that also, whatever you do gets, it's something which gets linked to your entire tribe. So, so if you fail somewhere, it's that the entire community of women has failed. It's not taken individually. So it's always linked that, okay, women are like that kind of thing. No, it happens rather than taking, which is normally, I'm sure everybody has. There's also a thing where you find at times, especially I've seen it in earlier part of my career, that just because out of goodness, many people try to be very, overprotective, and even, you feel that since it's a woman or somebody in a tough workplace, you need to be overprotected and kind of they will, so one thing I've been very conscious of is that the care and concern and protection of anyone should not become an impediment in my growth professionally. So that's something you have to be very conscious about, because it's not that the other person is doing in good faith, but you need to be very sure, because many times I have seen many officers, including young people who enter at different hierarchies in the police, that sometimes you become then so comfortable in that kind of a thing that it's very nice that you say, okay, I'll just sit at that desk and I'm going to do this desk job, and I don't want to run around and do a guard duty at night or something. Why should I do? And then you never push your boundaries. So you have to be very conscious about that. So that's another thing.
Anything, any incident that you can share with us, that where you felt like you have pushed the glass ceiling, and of course where we can see you where you are right now, but again there would have been some incidences.
There have been so many of them, but and I wouldn't even like to say that you are pushing or breaking the glass ceiling or anything. I think it is happening something in the daily course of job which you are doing, and something maybe it is something because when we entered we were very few of them. So I think it starts at every part, whatever you are entering. People would say you are the first dash. And the number is so small that you will actually end being first. Not that there's anything great about it.
But
So there's
a sense of achievement maybe. Milestones in your career where you felt, yes, I did this.
See, that starts, for me, some of them are very personal in the sense that I'm sure it must be already there somewhere because I say it everywhere, is that I'm not a very outdoor kind of a person. So that goes for the things. I'm not a very outdoor kind of person. Secondly, I'm also a very introvert. So for me, those two were very big achievements in the sense the first achievement was actually being able to be in the police and clearing the police the training without any concessions, and then going about the entire course of so it's whether you are working for hours together, whether you are doing duties for you have instances where you're standing for hours and hours together and doing duties, or you're running around. So that being able to do that, every time I do it, I feel happy about it. Even okay, I did that kind of thing. That I'm doing that. Another is the part of being an introvert. So I was an extremely introvert person also. So for me, even that's like today's interaction, or every time I come out and speak in public, it's an achievement. Okay, I've done it, although inside I'm like completely scared. As I said, I'm scared because I'm not a person who goes onto the stage. I've never been somebody who's like very comfortable being on the stage, but the job has forced me, and I always feel that if I hadn't joined this job, I wouldn't have ever known also that I can do that. So yeah, so these are personal. Otherwise, job achievements, to be very frank, I really don't talk that this is something which is I have done. It's okay. I mean, I think everybody does it. Maybe some good keeps happening, but for me, which I say often, is that for me it is that. Because police is the kind of thing where you don't come to us in happy situations. Rarely does anybody come, with the kind of thing. So I would feel that even in the course of day, if I am able to put smile on face of one person who has visited me in distress, I think I'm happy. I would count that as rather than any other milestone. That's okay. Whatever has happened, it's out there. The career, what you've done, you've not done.
Ma'am, being in the service for a long time now, I wanted to understand what kept you motivated all the time, ma'am.
The same thing. being able to help people in distress. As I said, you don't come to police in happy situation. So this is one of the jobs where, when somebody in distress comes, I think the only other place which can be compared is the medical profession, where people come to you. So the ability to do that, so the job gives you a little power to do that. So if you are able to all combine and do that part, I think that's something keeps you going. I mean, I feel that in your own little way you can make those small little changes. I realize that none of us can change the world or change the system. If you think that मैं सब कुछ बदल दूंगी type, it doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. But I believe that at least this job gives you that opportunity to make those small little changes which do affect individuals and which affect somebody's life. So many things you do which actually affects some individual. Just for although we're talking about she teams or something, just the fact that now Hyderabad is rated one of the safest cities. It affects life choices of so many women and girls. Because when you're talking about girls, where and how they are going to study and where they're going to work, so their life choices depend very, very much on the safety index of a place. So if by the work which we have been doing, we've been able to create that, I think that, the numbers, if I say that, okay, she team, so many complaints received, did this, I don't think that is the real number which is. It is that indirectly how many lives have affected. And that I think is immense. I mean, what more can one wish for? Even if nobody will come back and say to me that, okay, I'm able to work because you did it or somebody in the department did, I'm okay with it. But yes, and I won't be even able to give you a figure that, okay, maybe these many people are affected. But I think at the back of the mind, every girl or woman who's working or every parent who's sending a child to Hyderabad for maybe somewhere outside who doesn't live it, or even if you're living it, allowing that your child can go and out, work in the night duties or be late and all. So many life choices are affected because somebody has been working and thinking the department, the government is doing that. So I think that's something huge.
So ma'am, police job or training in general prepares you for anything and everything, and you have said this somewhere. So were there any experiences that where you felt, oh, I didn't expect this, or
Which is really tough.
Yeah.
Which I can never forget is the rock climbing module in the academy. So I remember that we had this huge rock in the academy, and there was some teams which came from other agencies, and we were supposed to go climb up and do the rappelling and coming. So I remember being on top of that place and then looking down, and you feel Nietzsche, you could see those, you had those ambulance and all that kind of thing being, they have to prepare being there. Right? I was really scared. And and at that moment I thought that, it's something you have no control, you have to do it. I mean, there's no way to say that I can't do it. And be what it is, if it's written that this is the last day, let this be the last day you have to do. So I remember, so that's, yeah. But the sense of once you completed it was like immense. So as I said, I mean, I wouldn't have ever thought of doing anything like that in my life otherwise.
And you said you watched OTT.
Yep.
There are so many riveting crime dramas. so riveting. I mean, did you come across any such case in your career where you found it very difficult, but you managed to crack the case?
It is, and you see, personally I believe that each and every case which comes to you is important. So the thing is that there are cases which are very complicated, or the ones which which catch the attention of everybody. But personally I feel that each and every case, for the individual to whom it happens, to him or her, that is the most important case. So it's not that X case which became focus of something is the case which is the case. So policing, how you do your daily policing, how you handle that is something which is very important, rather being lost in the noise of it all about. So cases have been many, I mean from arresting people who were senior to me in very early part of my career, belonging to the same department, to investigating train accidents, to investigating certain very complicated cases in anti-corruption bureau or in otherwise. So there have been numerous cases, some very very difficult cases where you don't have any, it seems like a blind kind of a thing. So there have been numerous, two very tragic cases of we had cases of very 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 extremely young children being subjected to abuse, very very, and cases where you can't imagine, like grandmother assaulting a grandchild, a boy, very young child, in sexually. So you actually see a lot of underbelly of the society when you're doing it. But I guess that it's the daily ones which affect each and every one which is more important.
How do you balance your work-life balance? Because both of you are, your husband also is in the department.
I think work-life balance is a myth. There's nothing like there's nothing like a balance which happens with work and life. They really can't. I personally feel that it's like something which you are, you're just managing. Only thing is you have to be intelligent enough to prioritize, and the priorities can change even in the course of the day, not only over a period of time. So you have to be very intelligent that you know which is the priority at that particular point of time and do it. But also that said, I've always believed that my job is important to me. It's not that the family isn't, but it's that it is important to me. So it's not that I don't do it just as a hobby. I mean, it's something which is important to me, and since it is important to me, therefore I have to be very intelligent of how to prioritize. So neither can the family be neglected nor the job can, but you have to prioritize. Sometimes something will get neglected, sometimes something else will get neglected. But yes, I don't wear a cape which ensures that I can be a perfect everything and balance. It doesn't happen like that. Yes, just prioritize and just and God has been kind that the family is supportive. That's something which is very important. The children have been very understanding. I mean, they adjust to our schedules rather than we adjusting to theirs. So I think that's how it has worked, and I hope it will work on future also.
I would like to ask you about the Cambodia case. So job seekers who are looking for jobs abroad, they get scammed, and we know what the case is like. They are being forced to work in cybercrime. So is this job scam, or do you see this as cyber-enabled trafficking, or what is it? And how many people from Telangana have been, caught in Cambodia or any other place per se? And what is the coordination with, say, I4C or like immigration officials?
See, as far as what we are now calling this as cyber slavery, I mean, that's the terminology which is being accepted and is used, is definitely that people who are seeking job, and then that is where that they are being taken to work in these call centers sort of thing which is operating in those countries. With we have to understand that many of them are actually happily also working there without complaining, and they are unfortunately indulging in cybercrime. But while many others are actually face a lot of abuse of all types. So, and the conditions are quite pathetic, we've seen. The collaboration with I4C is extremely good. In fact, T4C was the precursor of I4C. and we have our own officer who started T4C, now heading the I4C. So therefore we have one of the best kind of both worlds right now, and so there's no issue as far as coordination is concerned. We've also had interaction with our own, for example, one important link or one important department is the protector of immigrants, who is the one who actually authorizes agents who can allow people to work abroad. So I had a meeting with them in our office. So we are closely coordinating. We are closely coordinating with I4C. We are coordinating with the MEA. We are also through them coordinating with agencies which are working in those parts of the world to get.
Tamcom is also there.
Yeah, who are working there to get those people back. At our level, we are also in touch with the families of the people whom we know are there, trying to tell the families that this is what it is, so that they can impress upon their children, and if they want to come back, we are telling how and whom they should approach in Cambodia, because the embassies in all these countries are now very, very active on this front. So all that guidance from here we are doing. The numbers keep changing which come to us. With all these countries put together, a figure which we had till recently was somewhere around 50, 60, 100 people, but that must be much less than the actual number, because a lot of people do not actually take this direct. Nobody flies out directly from here to Cambodia.
60 from Telangana.
At Cambodia itself, but it would be much more, because those lists get updating. Because these people don't go directly, you're not traveling directly from here to Cambodia that you can get a list out of the immigration or something. So there's a different way. Either they take the channel from Dubai to go there, or they will fly to one of Thailand or something and then use it. So it becomes difficult, but the lists keep coming to us from the Government of India and from groundwork. Numbers are expected to be in a couple of thousands. Name-wise list right now with us would be much less, because it keeps updating as the information keeps flowing in.
Once again, I thank you on behalf of all my
Pleasure.
friends. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.